the second breakout session here in our main conference room this afternoon. Here to talk about key considerations in adopting cloud solutions, please welcome from EMC, Senior Solutions Principal, Yannick Townsend.
Let me start by asking you a question. What has cloud and cloud solutions really taught us that we can bring into our business? So we know that cloud is agile, it's automated, and it's orchestrated, and it's transparent. And what businesses really want is they want that agility. They want that automation and orchestration in the IT services that they consume. Now, to adopt those principles and tenets is internal IT really needs to transform. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Yannick Townsend. I work for EMC. And every day I talk to customers and I advise them, and we work to adopting these principles of cloud in a transformative way. And through this presentation, we will have a quiz and we will have prizes. I've got a Bluetooth speaker with me, and I've got 8 of them, based on the content that you will see and that we will impart with you. So my colleague Emma Pudney from Rackspace, both EMC and Rackspace have a partnership, and we work with customers to help them transform onto public cloud, onto Rackspace managed public cloud. So, in the area of transformation, we really have 3 areas. We have the application transformation space, and this is all about adopting the new patterns, the new standards that your applications will need to abide by when moving on to cloud. We have the infrastructure space, which is probably the most talked about space in this area, and it's really all about public cloud, private cloud, and the merging of the two, the hybrid. And then we have the operating model. And the operating model, especially in this transformation, is really all about the new skills, the new roles that you will need as an internal business. It's about the new consumption models that cloud brings, self-service. And it's all about the service management that will be there that you will need to use to deliver those tenets of cloud within your enterprise. And the talk that I'd like to impart with you today will be based on the area of the operating model. And my colleague Emma will talk about the application space and how and what is required when you migrate your applications to the public cloud. So let's look at the problem space in this situation, especially around skills and roles. So one of the issues that IT has is that traditional IT has always operated in silos. It's done in a very bespoke way. So when a business requirement comes to IT and says, well, I want an outcome, IT says, okay, well, I need to architect it, I need to design it, I need to hand this to my network team, I need to hand this to my compute team, storage team, and so forth. And all of that takes time. And meanwhile, the business is waiting. I like to use lead time to describe this problem because lead time says from the time where I make a request to the time where it's delivered is the measurement of that time. And right now, traditional IT is taking weeks and months to deliver IT solutions based on business requirements. What the business is doing is just saying, well, look, it's taking me weeks and months to get this outcome when I can go outside of internal IT and say, well, I can consume this in days. What gives? So IT has a number of issues. One is that they need to transform. They need to move away from this bespoke way of operating, the solid way of operating. And they need to regain the business's trust. So what's the solution? So in moving to a new operating model with new skills and roles that are required to enable this, is IT needs to move away from traditional order taking. This is kind of sitting back, waiting for orders to come into you, and then you architecting, designing, and taking it through the life cycle. IT needs to gain business skills. And they need to gain them because they need to advise the business. They need to consult to the business, and they need to guide the business through this kind of new world that we're in. Because as we've seen today in a number of presentations, is we have a lot of disruption. And I'm sure a lot of you are in businesses who are either disrupting or being disrupted. IT needs to move away from one-off initiatives. So this is the bespoke way of operating, treating every project, every initiative as a unique situation, and moving more towards standardized offerings. And in moving towards standardized offerings is you need to govern them. So this isn't only in the services that cloud promotes. This is in the contracts that you issue. It's in financial management. It's in vendor management. Now, going back to the problem of lead time. So responding in weeks and months no longer works. We need to move into a situation where we're continually delivering on the requirements of the business, moving more towards continuous delivery and the skill sets that underpin that. That's called release engineering. And to do that is you need standardized platforms, because the second you start to standardize your services, they become more efficient, your variable costs go down, and you're in a better position to support them. And finally, looking at the delivery of projects, it no longer works, and the business actually doesn't care about just getting a virtual machine. They want an outcome. So this solid way of operating where you get a VM from the hosting team and you build it, you add storage to it, you test it, all that needs to change. IT needs to operate in an as-a-service world, and that means having cohesion and bring together all of those elements of those silos together to deliver that outcome for the business. And this is key in the area of IT service centers. So in comes a new operating model. So I mentioned before that IT needs to develop new business skills. IT needs to embed themselves within the business in a relationship management role. And this is there to guide the business to adopt standardized services, managed and governed by service portfolio management, delivered by IT service centers, and supported by service operations. All of which adopt and use the principles of cloud: standardization, automation, orchestration, enabling agility. So how do we get there? In all of the customers that we've seen, that we've talked to, how we've enabled them to adopt this new way of operating with these new skills is we've always started off with an incubator. And this incubator will always sit alongside your existing IT operations. And you have minimal viable services there to enable usually a greenfield project. And why you want this separated out and alongside your existing IT operation is because you are creating a new culture. It is a new way of operating. It's not just about technology, it's not just about process, but operating in a new way means you are changing the culture of how you deliver IT services. And over time, you bring in people into this organization. And from that, you can start to separate out your governance roles, your business relationship management roles. You enable new IT service centers to come in, where traditionally an IT service center could be networks or compute or storage. Now it's cloud services, big data, security, enterprise applications. And over time, you start to decommission legacy services. And you start to pull in those roles and skills that you need to enable your enterprise to deliver business outcome. And that, in turn, translates into agility. So let's go into the topic that I started off with. What are the new skills and roles that businesses really need and internal IT really need to enable these tenets of cloud within their enterprise? So I mentioned before that businesses, or IT, needs to adopt business skills. And this is there to be embedded within the business and there to guide and consult to the business. IT needs to win the trust of the business. And they can only do that if they work with them. We have service operations. So in this new world of cloud services and cloud consumption, we will need skills that are more akin to that of a software developer. Gone are the days of simply having sysadmins performing configuration tasks. Now it's a combination of network engineers, storage engineers, computer engineers that have development skills that can stitch together these services that are both internal and external. We have portfolio management. This is your governance layer. This is all about enabling standardized services to be promoted through the business. Portfolio management enables new services. They manage them. They contract them. But in all of that, they need to do it in a standardized way. Because standardization brings in automation and in turn delivers and is enabled through orchestration. And finally, in the IT service center, this is your service delivery. You need architecture and design resources that understand these new world services so they can standardize on them, so they can deliver them in blueprints and patterns that are reusable. And all that is there to deliver an outcome for the business. So in this quick talk, let me summarize what we've talked about today. So some of the key considerations that you really need to think about bringing those tenets of cloud, really enabling the business, and bringing in agility, is that you need to start small. Changing is a journey. Okay? You need to, and IT needs to develop business skills. These are skills that will complement existing IT knowledge and will be there to interact and elicit business requirements to be translated into IT requirements. One thing I haven't mentioned through this talk is any form of transformation, any initiative like this, requires an IT strategy. Because you get three things from an IT strategy. You get a problem definition, you get a set of guiding principles, and you get a coherent set of actions on how to get there. And transformation will use those guiding principles to form the transformation journey. And as part of this, to conclude, IT needs to develop new skills, new roles, to take advantage of these market opportunities. That's all the time I have for you. Thank you.
Hello. Magic. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma Pudney from Rackspace, and I run the... Oh, it's bright up here. Can't see anyone. ANZ, I run the professional services division within ANZ Business here for Rackspace. So the first thing I'm going to do today is I'm going to test whether you guys have emerged from your food comas yet from lunch, and we're going to have a pop quiz. And you have the opportunity to win one of these, well, you can't see through that, one of these stylish Bluetooth speakers if you get this right. And the first person, if I can see you, to get your hand up, gets one of these prizes. Are we ready? Nope, not there, over here. Goran from Kogan. spoke earlier today. And he said that his organisation imposed a tax. Oh, God. Anyone up there? Person that Yannick's pointing at. Correct. Ping pong, as my Japanese au pair said. Come up the front, sir, and you can grab your Bluetooth speakers. There you go. Just put them there. I have a job to do up here about presenting something or other. Alrighty. So let's get into the guts of things. So Yannick, my colleague at EMC there, he kindly took us through the operating model when it comes to transformation. And a lot of the things that he spoke about, standardization, new skills and new roles, business agility and speed, and breaking down those silos, they also apply to varying degrees, varying degrees to the application transformation space as well. And so I'm going to focus today on the application transformation. So the first part, one of my favorite sayings is that cloud is for everyone, but not everything. So we're going to focus on the cloud migration because that's our transformation, because that's the topic of today's session. And I want to emphasize that cloud is a fantastic technology. We can do all sorts of things with it, but it's not necessarily always the right platform for your applications and workloads. So I'm going to start sort of give it a bit of an example to sort of tell this story. So recently I was working with an organization who is, it's a very competitive market. They've grown rapidly. They're leaders in their space. Their entire business is 100% dependent on their online application. And over time, they've grown, and they're running on cloud, and they've transformed the top layer of their application, so the web and application tier, to leverage the capabilities of cloud. So it scales horizontally. And they scale up considerably during peak times of load. But on the back end, their application is still quite monolithic. So the database itself has disk I/O bottleneck problems when load gets high. So over time, they've scaled vertically, gone on to the bigger instance, the next bigger instance, the bigger, the next, until they are now on the biggest instance you can possibly consume on cloud. They're paying $1 gazillion billion an hour, and they're still having disk I/O bottleneck issues. So in this instance, that database platform could be put on physical infrastructure and leverage that capability and the ability to throw hardware at the performance challenge, giving their developers breathing space to then go and redevelop their application to scale horizontally, a bit of database sharding and so forth. So that's an example of, an application that might belong in a different platform to cloud. So step one is, do I move to cloud or do I not move to cloud? Step two is, what's my migration approach? So there's typically 3 categories of migration you can follow when it comes to moving to cloud. The first is lift and shift. The second is rebuild. And the third is transformation. So let's dive into those into a bit more detail. So lift and shift, fairly self-explanatory. Oh, I'm going to use this because I want to. Lift and shift. So it's fairly self-explanatory. You just take your workload, if it's running on a VMware environment today, that might be taking your VMDK file, and you suck it up into cloud. That's a technical term, by the way. You suck it up onto cloud. And once you've got it there, it runs as it did in the traditional environment, or the original environment that it does today. So there's some pros associated with that. It's obviously a quick process. Being a quick process, it's therefore a cost-effective process, a fairly cost-effective migration. But one of the downsides is that sucking up process that I so technically described involves things like, in a Windows environment, doing a search and replace on the registry for all your, if you're taking it from a VMware environment, search and replace on the registry for all your VMware drivers, and replacing it with the hypervisor drivers of the cloud that you're migrating to. Does that sound like a particularly stable and solid process to follow? It's not. It notoriously leaves the environment relatively unstable. It hits issues. So your operational burden is actually higher, even though your migration process was less. And the other problem, or many other problems, of course, exist, such as if you had a problem in your environment today, just because you've migrated it to cloud does not mean that you've magically solved that problem. It won't just magically auto-scale. It's not going to leverage the benefits of cloud, such as your object storage and auto-scaling or scheduling or any of those juicy parts of cloud. It's also, if you've got your configuration unknown and undocumented, which of course you haven't, everybody perfectly documents all their applications and we don't have to worry about that sort of thing. But let's say you hypothetically haven't documented it. Just by moving it to cloud isn't going to get the documentation written for you either. So you've got an environment with an unknown configuration. And finally, you've got environments such as Microsoft clusters, which you can't lift and shift to the cloud because that technology doesn't exist in cloud. So you're still going to have to transform in some way, shape, or form there. So that's lift and shift. Now let's go down into the middle ground, which is the rebuild space. And this is where you look at transforming or orchestrating the provisioning of your operating system onto cloud instances. So in this particular case, you're creating standardization at that operating system layer. And then what you're going to do is you're going to manually install your applications on top of that. So on the pros side of things, you've now got a stable environment. We haven't done our sucking up process and magically replaced some drivers. We've got a known and documented build because we have documented as we've done it because we know how much we love doing that. And we've got standardization, which is one of the tenets of cloud that we've been speaking about, that standardization drives so many benefits. On the downside, there's still a considerable amount of manual effort associated with installing those applications on cloud, and you're still not necessarily leveraging all the benefits of cloud. So you're not auto-scaling and using your object storage and all those kinds of things. So let's get to the juicy option. Voila, transformation. So in this space, we're looking at orchestrating your application from the operating system, middleware, all the way through to your application layer. That's a lot of automation, and it means that we can now go with the click of a button or the running of a script and provision your environment and your application, your VMs on the cloud. So this has a whole heap of pros. It's stable. It's a known configuration because it's doing what we call treating your infrastructure as code. You've configured your entire application stack. And this is what Ben was speaking about before when he was talking about DevOps. So this is the process of DevOpsifying. Yes, I made that word up, but it's now a real word. DevOpsifying your environment and getting that orchestrated and provisioned on the cloud. So you've now got your configuration and your infrastructure documented within your code. You've got a configuration management process because if you want to change any of that, you change it in your code and it's documented there and it's standardized and it's used for every single deployment that you do. You've also built in, presumably, as part of that orchestration process, the ability to leverage the benefits of cloud. So that's auto-scaling, that's using your object storage, that's scheduling your workloads to switch on and off as needed. And finally, it's enabling you to go down the self-service path. So, now that we can run up a new environment by the click of a button, we can enable things through portals and scripts to provide self-service to our business users. That drives business agility and speed within the business. On the downside, it doesn't come for free. There's a lot of effort associated with that orchestration process. And that means that you need to be very clever about how you make that decision as whether or not to transform. And likewise, and this is where we're going to go next, it's not necessarily suitable for all applications. So moving on. Transformation, the fun bit. Should you or should you not transform? And it's not just a technology question. So it's really an ROI decision as to whether or not you should transform your business. Transform your business. Well, yes, but transform your application. So there are two questions that you need to ask. The first question is, how can that workload leverage the benefits of cloud? And what does the value of those benefits drive to my business? And then the second question is, what is the effort associated with transforming that workload onto cloud? So let's have a look at the first one in terms of, can my workload leverage the benefits of cloud? Does your workload have spiky variable load? Can it be scheduled? So is it a workload or an application that can be only leveraged during business hours and switched off out of hours and over the weekend, introducing infrastructure cost savings? Is it something that's frequently deployed? Do users need new versions of or new instances of this application frequently, training environments, dev environments, UAT environments? Is it frequently changed? So is your application being deployed in an agile process, or do you need to make frequent updates to that environment? And lastly, does it have is it a large-scale environment with many identical units? So having that configuration identical and mirrored across multiple instances and deployable in an automated fashion of benefit. So there's some of the things you need to look at from how do you drive benefit from migrating to the cloud. But then we need to look at, okay, what is the investment associated with transforming? So here are the things that you need to pay attention to. That was a hint. That you need to pay attention to around investing to transform and the things that will impact the cost associated with that. So the first is roles. So you have, many environments have a number of different roles. You might, for example, have a 3-tier application, web, app, DB, 3 roles. But many enterprise applications and even non-enterprise applications can have a range of different roles associated with them as well. You might have a reporting role, a business analytics role. There was a calculating role that someone was talking about earlier today in one of their applications. And any number of roles that are relevant to the application. Each of those roles needs to be orchestrated, and that requires time and effort. How much prerequisite software is necessary for your application? Does it have, different frameworks, .NET framework? Do you have a whole heap of DLLs that need to be installed? Do you have a monitoring agent, a backup agent? All of these kinds of things all need to be orchestrated. Again, effort. How many primary applications do you have? Microsoft SQL Server, WebSphere, other software. Whatever it is that your application might leverage, and in the market, thousands and thousands of applications. And then, does it have a silent install? This has caught my team up previous times, in previous roles and other roles in there before I started at Rackspace, that, we've gone to orchestrate workloads and there's been no silent install process. And then we've gone about, yep, we can make this work. And the fact of the matter is, when you try and orchestrate a workload that doesn't have a silent install process, then you're trying to make it do things that it's not created to do, and it's very, very hard. Other things that have an impact are, do you need to work with a third-party vendor or a few of them? Is there AD integration? Are there compliance requirements, either financial or PCI-based requirements? And then finally, one that sort of relates to what Yannick was speaking about before in terms of silos within your business. If you're working with an application team who are more aligned to the traditional way of doing business and are heavily siloed, don't necessarily like sharing IP between business, build their little empire, protect it very well. Or if they're potentially a team that is not considered the most exceptional performing team and they might be not that particularly responsive, then what you can find is you end up doing many iterations of this orchestration process. So you gather all your requirements, you do your orchestration, you go, voila, application team, look, I've orchestrated it for you. And then they go, oh, I forgot to mention this bit. And then you go back and you orchestrate that bit, and it means you have to undo some of the other stuff you did, and you come back, you do it again. And that process can go on and on and on. And I'll go through an example that was very much like that with previous engagement. So let's have a look at a couple of real-world examples. One good example, I was working with an enterprise where one of the common stacks that they worked with was SharePoint WFD. And the way things worked was that within the business, they had hundreds of applications and many application teams that were responsible for supporting those applications. Very competitive market in the retail space. And they had this application stack that they used, and the way it would work is one of the application teams within the business would get budget to run a project. They would then go, right, I'm going to build this on top of SharePoint WFD. And they would go away and they would walk up to the WFD team and say, hey, I need X number of instances, when can I have it? And the team would go, in a few days, in a few weeks, maybe a couple of months, I'll get back to you. And that process could drag out considerably depending on the workload on that team at the time. So it was a really good candidate for transformation. Now, the transformation process, the orchestration process, took some time. It actually took about 2 to 3 months from first workshop to completed product. And probably I would say in that case it was about 4 to 5 weeks of actual engineering effort that went into that process. We had a silent install process, but it was a bit botchy. We had to go back and forward a few times. There were some external components that needed to be worked in, so we worked with a third-party vendor on that. But what happened is, after all of that orchestration effort, we got it down to a point that they enabled it in their self-service portal, and from a click of a button, the rest of the business, when they now need something, click a button, it goes through a workflow. It says, have you hit your quota yet? Yes, no, no? Well, you can have that server. Have you hit your quota yet? Yes. Go ask the team. It then goes ask the team for approval. And then within 1 hour, they've got their application stack up and running, and they're now able to be competitive in the marketplace and get applications out fast. They can also fail fast, which is a really important part of one of the benefits of cloud. So it was a really good example. Now for the not so good example. So again, an enterprise setting where we had an application that had 2 instances, Windows 2003, everybody's favorite operating system, and hadn't been touched since Windows 2003 had been installed. And they went, let's transform this workload. And we thought, oh, that might not be the best idea, but you're paying us. And so we worked with the team from first workshop to the end of the transformation. 6 months elapsed. We're talking about 2 servers here. 6 months elapsed. In terms of effort, I would say it was quite difficult to gauge it exactly because we charged for most of it, but there was so much other effort. Probably about 8 weeks to 9 weeks of actual effort, engineering effort went into this. It didn't have a silent install process. We had to work with a third-party vendor. It was bespoke software. The team was not the most responsive team. Even within the business, they weren't known as being the most responsive team. So they were challenged by the communication processes and us trying to work in an agile way. And we transformed it. So 6 months later, it's transformed. 6 weeks worth of effort, 9 weeks worth of effort later, it's transformed. And it's still exactly the same as it was when we did it. It hasn't been deployed again. It hasn't been changed. We just spent basically 9 weeks of effort to reinstall that application over there on the cloud for it to not do anything. So that's a bad example of applications to transform. So, in summary, the first thing is that not every application is suitable for cloud. The first decision you need to make is, am I going to be able to get benefit out of moving this application to the cloud? Now, it may not be greater benefit than another platform, but as long as it's not taking away or decreasing the performance or the agility of the platform, then it might be okay to lift and shift it or rebuild it onto the cloud. But don't put a workload that is best suited for low latency, high performance, massive disk I/O straight into the cloud without proper consideration. Secondly, really consider your migration approaches. So you've got lift and shift, rebuild, and transformation. And if you decide, yes, I'm going to go down the transformation approach, then do an ROI assessment on that for each application. Is it worth me investing all that effort, however many weeks it might be, to transform this application when I'm only going to touch it 2 or 3 times a year? So they're the things that I would say would summarize what we're on to today. And now I'm going to test whether or not you are awake and listening, because I can't see through these lights anyway, so you could all be sleeping back there. I wouldn't have a clue. So question number 1, you're going to make Yannick can see because he hasn't got lights in his eyes. We're going to do a bit of a quiz. Firstly, what are the 3 types of transformation within a business? Oh, yep. Not quite what we're looking for, though you might want to answer some of the questions later because they're definitely part of it. You're talking about migration approaches. Next one. Bing bong! Come up and get your speakers. Application, infrastructure, and operating model. Alrighty, list 3 new roles that need to be considered within a transformed business operating model. There's lots of them, so come on guys, you can do that. No one, do I get to take home some speakers? Yep. 3, but because it's so no one's putting their hand up, we'll go for 2. As a group, you might be able to answer this question. You have to come up with a share plan for the... There's some cheating going on there. There's a whole heap. So, business relationship manager, services marketing manager, cloud admin, help desk technician, platform engineer. There are so many. All right, moving on. True or false? And if you don't know the answer to this one, then I've failed this entire session. A static workload consisting of a single server running a bespoke application that is barely touched is an obvious candidate for transformation. False. Yay! I taught someone something. Cool. False. Okay, list 3 things that influence the effort associated with transforming an application. Oh, that's a bit slower. If you think you got 3 of them, give it a go. Well, you sort of read 3 things from 3 different parts of the presentation. Did you see anyone? I saw the guy up the back with no hair up here, but lots down here.
All right. Software prerequisites, silent installs, and third-party software, or like third-party software.
Third-party vendor? Yep. Very good. So a whole heap there. AD integration, compliance, requirements, silent install process, third-party engagement, number of primary applications, all those things make it harder to, more effort. Okay, so this one's almost like a bit of a bonus prize. Yannick and I had some themes that we tried very hard to repeat these themes throughout the session, but we may have forgotten a little bit. So there were some recurring themes throughout the presentation. I think the lady in the red jacket should have a go at these because she got 2 before, or I think she at least got 1 before. Identify 2 of those things. Over here, yeah.
Investing to transform roles.
One more, come on. You said it, you said it.
Primary applications.
No.
Third-party integration. VC requirements.
You should go, I'm gonna give you one just for effort, right? You're getting one just for just for trying. All right, next, who wants to, yep, there's 2. The guy behind you actually beat you. I'm sorry. Go for it.
As a service,
Oh, did you win one before?
would it work with 2 speakers?
Yeah, I was going to say. All right, sorry, go again. Go.
Service-oriented model or as a service and transformation across the board?
Oh, not quite. Whoop, up the back there. No, they were the topics today. See, I told you we didn't do a great job. All right, well, I'll start giving a few hints. The first one starts with S, and it's a really long word, and it ends in no. Bingo, that's one. You need to come up with 2. All right, so the lady in the red jacket came up with one. Was the, you might need, Yannick went over it, you need a whole heap of new skills and roles. All right, we happen to have 2 left, so we're going to split it between you 2. All right, though that's all for today. Yannick and I are both in the transformations sections up the back of the room, over in the other room. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to come and speak with us. See you.
Thank you, Emma and Yannick. That concludes the second breakout session of the day, and we now have a break before the third breakout session. The break lasts until 3:35 p.m., so go ahead and explore the Solutions Pavilion next door, get some refreshments outside, and then pick the breakout session of your choice starting at 3:35 p.m.